Hi and welcome to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. I hope you're having a beautiful day today. For the free tutorial here on YouTube today, I'd like to share with you my StarFlower Pendant. Now it's a lot easier than it looks and it's a whole lot of fun because there's hammering. Let's head down to the board and look at the component parts together and then let's assemble it. So here's the StarFlower Pendant. You don't have to make it as a pendant. I have chosen to because I really enjoy making pendants, and all I've done is just added this basically double wrapped loop up at the top to act as a very mobile bail. So there are two main components to this piece. We've got a central spiral and then we've got a repeated heart shape. So to make the heart shape, I'm going to cut 5 lengths of 1mm or 18 gauge wire, and I'm going to demonstrate to you once how to create the form that we need. So this is around about 3.5 inches in length, and that makes up a nice pendant of a decent size, probably a little bit big for a ring maybe, but as a pendant it's a really good size. So 5 lengths, 1mm or 18 gauge, and we're going to start off by finding that centre point. You could measure that if it's easier for you, and putting a deep V into the centre point. Now once you've turned that V in the section, you might like to measure it to make sure that it is dead in the centre. If it's not, you can just move it along ever so slightly. So I'm just going to open that out gently and just nibble along at the little bit down at the base and get that slightly more even. So in order to create the heart form, which is what we're looking to do, we're going to create 5 little heart shapes. Let's just move that slightly further up into the corner. I'm going to be using my pliers that are designed for use with memory wire, but they're also really handy for getting repeatable sizes. So I'm just going to use the smaller side. That's Joey Dog involving himself in the conversation, and I'm just going to turn that over to begin with to create that first part of the circular form. It's not completely closed up, I'm not going to worry about it. So let's flip that over onto the other side and do the same thing. Now before I began, I made sure that both ends were cut neat and flush. What we're going to do now is to turn this V shape with loops on the end into a heart shape. Now, one of the reasons that this design works really well is that you need to have the heart shapes be exactly the same, and I'll show you how you can help achieve that in just a moment. What we're going to do is start moving those circular forms. I'm just going to close that up slightly so that the cut end touches the inside of that curve. We'll do the same on the other side, just pushing that over gently. What we're looking for is to have the circular form be down beneath the top of the heart, so that we've got this segment just as an arc. This is the bit that's going to connect to the loop, so it's important that you don't leave the loop up at the top, that you do indeed move it down towards the lowest section. So I'm going to flip this over because the design needs to be the same from all angles and it needs to be repeatable. So small manoeuvres are going to help you. And what we're looking to do is to get that little heart shape. So you can see that one side is slightly on the wonk, so I'm just going to close that up until they look pretty much symmetrical. So that's a little bit wider on the one side, so I can just open that back out gently and then turn it over so that they more closely resemble one another. So you'll need to get 5 of these that are all the same, and once they are identical we'll hammer them. So let's just pop that to one side for a moment. I have prepared 5 pieces already, and in order to see that they are as close replications of one another as possible, what I tend to do is just stack them all on top of one another. You might like to grab a pair of pliers, and in that way you can kind of look down the stack and see if there are any outliers. Using a flat plier would be much more sensible, but that's on the other side of my desk. So you can take a moment just to make sure that all 5 pieces do match up. I promise you that these do match close enough for my standards. It's just a funny camera angle. So that's one way that you can check, or you can have a master and follow the master and put the other 4 up against it in order and make sure that they all match up. But once you're happy that you have 5 pieces that are indeed identical, you're going to grab your block and we're going to get them nice and hammered flat. Now, one of the reasons that this design works is that it's quite strong yet jointed. So we want these to be mobile, but we want them to be strong in case they catch on anything. So just putting that down flat, making sure that no pieces of wire cross over the top of other pieces of wire. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put pressure in this direction and in this direction, bringing those two heart lobes together so that the wire doesn't spring out when you start putting pressure on it. So there's pressure coming from the top down to hold the heart form onto the block, but also from either side. The reason I start with the pointed end is because that is most likely to just spring out. Now before I hammer this, not that I'm using this one anyway, but before I hammer it, I'm just going to make sure that I'm super happy that it does sit symmetrically opposite and it is a nice good looking heart. I'm quite happy with that. So once you hammer it again from the other end, we're going to start to see a change in the profile of the wire. We started with round wire, and again I'm putting a little bit of pressure from both sides as well as from above. When I start striking down at this juncture, I'm ever so slightly striking from this side, so from the outside, and that helps the wire to understand, as much as wire can understand, that I don't want it to spring out. Yes, that was my fingertip. No, I'm not worried. So the key with hammering wire is obviously not to smash yourself in the finger, but there we go, is to tell the wire what you want it to do. And what I wanted it to do was to change from a round wire to a much more oval wire, and it becomes a lot stronger. So it has taken on a life of its own. If you find that there is a mild difference, because we warmed the wire through before we worked it and we've just started hammering it, you do have a small amount of time, a small amount rather of manoeuvrability, just to ensure that that sits exactly how you want it to. For the next part of the StarFlower design, what we're going to do is to create a central spiral. Now what I've done is I've made sure that all of my 5 heart shapes are laid out on the board, so I've got an idea of how large a spiral I need to create. Now if you want to enhance this design further, you can make the spiral super loose, so you've just got a little bit of turning in the middle and you've got lots of space. You could even set beads into that, or a central cabochon if you prefer. I'm just going to go for a basic spiral and leave it up to you to add on any intricacies if you wish to. So I've just laid out my hearts with the lobes facing the centre and just getting them to sit as if they are all connected. Now if you wanted to, you could very simply wrap these hearts together to create the StarFlower form and use it in a different way, but today I'm going to pop a spiral into the centre. So I have around about 8 inches of 1mm or 18 gauge wire, which I've just cut a nice flush end to. We're going to begin by creating that coil. Again, I'm going to utilise my memory wire pliers just because it's really easy and you get the same kind of gap in the centre. Now when you're making coils, it's very easy to get carried away and to go too quickly, but if you slow it down, you'll make better coils. What you'll notice is that I haven't made a complete circle, but what I am going to do now is just push the cut end to the wire, and in doing that you can end up with a slightly rounder form rather than an oval form. Now I'm going to allow some space around that spiraled centre, and what we're going to do is to just spiral that wire out slowly. Now in my mind's eye, what I want to happen is for those wires to be the same distance apart as they spiral out and round. It's something that's quite magical, spirals in nature. I love fern fronds when they're new in the forest. I just could look at them and photograph them all day long. So I quite like the spiral. It appears in a lot of my jewellery. It's something that happens in nature, and I just wanted to reflect it in my jewellery as well. So take your time with your coiling and your spirals will come out neater. Just going to offer that down and see how many more turns of the wire we need. So when I first made this pendant, I didn't cut the wire off. I brought it up between 2 of the heart shapes out at the top, but I felt that it affected the shape of the StarFlower too much, so I redid the design to give you a different effect. So it's slightly more symmetrically spaced. So we're just going to continue with that spiraling nice and slowly until we fill that central aperture. And if there's a little bit more spiral than you need, don't worry. It's not a problem at all. They can sit ever so slightly apart if they need to. Let's have a look and see how that's looking. I think another turn around and then we should be golden. So let's just keep going for a moment longer. You might want to fast forward through this bit or just pause me when you have got to the point where you have filled that central aperture with your spiral. Now you could just use a pre-made finding. If you have a circle that fits, go for it. I know that Beadalon make quick links which are absolutely fantastic. So that's about right. So what I'm going to do here is just draw this tail of wire so that it sits down flush against the previous line of that spiral. So I'm just going to draw it across and closed. A bit like a snail shell. Make sure that that's not too much. No, that looks pretty good to me. And I'm going to leave around about 1/8 of an inch just sitting past that point before I trim away. So that's probably enough to create a little loop, a hanging loop up at the top if I want to, but I'm going to pop it in my scrap pot for now. So what we want to do is just double check that this is the size of spiral that we're looking for. I think that works really well. I'm just going to bodge these out of the way for a moment and hammer my spiral solidly. Now it is very, very easy for spirals to come out of the position you want them to be in when hammering. So what I tend to do is to support as much as I possibly can. I might actually use the toffee hammer instead this time of the big chasing hammer. So this is just a teeny tiny jeweler's hammer. It's very, very light. But it means that I'm going to be smashing less of the spiral at once. Much like guitars, you can never have too many hammers. So, you know, if your spiral does slightly come out of true, we can just modify that so it sits correctly before you move on to the next section of hammering. What I don't want to do is hammer this tail, so I'm just going to put my finger over the top there. Now you do have the option, if you want, of flipping your hammer over and adding some texture to the design. I'm not overly fussed. I might use the satinized side, the side that's been pushed down into my steel block. Haven't decided yet. We'll get to that in a minute. I just need to do a little bit more. Now the reason we haven't hammered this last little section is because I'm going to use it to tie off at the back. Let's remove the block. What I want to do is to just turn that away for the moment. So that's just pushed away. It doesn't need to be particularly neat, but there's about 1/8 of an inch there, 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch. Let's just bring our heart shapes back into position and just see if that fits in the middle. Now you may find that you need to just slightly shrink it down or even stretch it out a bit. That's close enough for me to not worry about. In the next section I'm going to show you how to bring those components all together to make your starflower shape, and if you want I'll even show you a little bit on the end about how you can add a mobile bail up at the top. So bringing everything together, I have around about 10-inch length of 0.4mm or 26 gauge wire. This is a medium gold colour, and what I'm going to do is start by rotating twice around my start point. Now that's just after the little angle, so to make my life easy I'm just going to rotate around with a little bit of a tail. I'm going to go for 2 wraps. Because there's lots of repeated wrapping, I don't feel the need to go for multiple wraps. Lots and lots of them, it's simply unnecessary. What I do want to do, however, is to get that cut end to sit down inside the design where it won't come to any difficulty. So let me just flip this over into the correct orientation, and I'll trim that end away just past where the wire, the finer gauge wire, goes over the top. I'm going to push that wire end down in between those 2 spiral sections. Now you might find that easier just to prise it apart slightly. Just push that down and then tighten up that coil so that it sits neatly. There, so the end is now tucked away between the coil and the outermost section. We're just going to leave that sticky uppy bit at the back for the moment. We're not going to worry about it. Actually, I can just see that I haven't managed to get that sticky end down, so let's just give that a quick spiral around. So you just rotate your pliers around on the end and you should get that neat and tidy. There we go. New glasses. So what we're going to do is begin by adding our first heart shape. Now what I would want to do here is let's move that up and into the light. What I want to do is to add 2 wraps around the outer lobe of the heart and the outermost spiral. So if I just pinch that together carefully, I can push the wire through the centre of the heart shape, or I can draw it up the centre like so. I do want these wraps to be nice and tidy. I want them to be firmly drawing the heart shape to the spiral. I'm going to push the leading edge up and through. Pull that firmly and make sure that I've got a good tight wrap around those 2. I'm then going to push the wire through, or again you can draw it up and through. So I've got 2 wraps around both the heart form and the spiral, and then I'm going to bring the tail up inside the spiral, draw the wire slightly diagonally. Sorry about Joey making himself known again. What I'm going to do now is wrap twice around just that outermost spiral. Push the wire down and through. Once and a second time up and through the heart to make your life easy. What I'm going to do here is just tighten up those 2 coils of wire and then draw the wire up inside the outermost spiral again, making sure that the heart form and the spiral are sat side by side. One isn't slipping underneath the other at any time. Then I'm going to draw the wire across the back sideways again at a bit of a diagonal, and we're going to tie twice again around the heart form and the spiral shape. So making sure that you're bringing that leading edge up through the correct place, all the way back down and through the heart again. So draw the wire up and through, like so. Pull everything into position and you've got your first heart shape in position. So we're not going to worry about this end section until we've added the rest of the 5 hearts. So I'm just going to add 1 more with you. What I am going to do is scooch that heart all the way around so that the first wrapping of wire sits at the end of the spiral before that bent over section. So between each heart form I'm going to do 2 wraps around just the spiral. I'm going to use my thumbnail to guide where I want those wraps to sit. Push the wire up inside that spiral again, make sure that those 2 wraps are neat and tidy, draw the wire sideways, and then we're going to bring in our next heart form. So what we're looking to do again is wrap twice around the outside of the lobe of the heart. So the easiest way is to just draw the wire up between those 2 little spiral sections, pull it firmly across the back of your design, push the wire up inside that outermost spiral. If I just move my hands out of the way, you can see what we're doing. Pinch everything together, so I've got another wrap to do just here, so you can push the wire through. Make sure it goes inside the lobe of the heart, diagonally across the back, push the wire up inside the outermost level of the spiral, and then 2 wraps around just the spiral. So that's 1, that's 2. Neat and tidy with those wraps. Bring the wire diagonally across the back and then up inside the outermost level of the spiral, and then we're going to wrap twice again on the second lobe of the heart, and you'll continue all the way around with 2 wraps around just the spiral between each heart and between each lobes, each time it passes between the lobes of the heart, sorry. So you can see we've got 2 wraps to start off, 2 wraps around the first lobe, 2 wraps around just the spiral, 2 wraps around the second lobe, 2 wraps around just the spiral, and then repeat until you've fitted all 5 hearts. So I've added all of the 5 hearts in exactly the same way, and I only just had enough of that finer gauge wire, so I'm going to suggest that you use 12 inches instead of 10 inches of that 0.4mm or 26 gauge, just to err on the side of caution. I'm going to show you now what to do with that little sticky up bit of wire, and that's your star flower design completed. I will also show you how to add a very simple bail if you want to add one in and use it, as I have, as a pendant. So we're currently looking at the rear side of the design, and you can see there's that sticky uppy bit of wire which was the outside end of the spiral. So what we're going to do is to make sure that that's a nice flat edge, leaving at least 1/8 of an inch, and we're just going to turn that over on the back to seal that spiral. So if I show you that sideways against my thumbnail there, you can see where the wire is. And what we're going to do is just turn it so that it sits behind the outer edge of that spiral as neatly as possible. And this just stops all of the wire coming off at the back. So you can see it's just like a bit of a loop. Let's get the light to play on that. Put my thumb underneath it. We've just made a hook on the end, and if you make sure that that's as tight and as close as you possibly can, once you flip it over to the front, you really can't see that, and you've got the little bit of the, I've used gold in this instance, the golden finer gauge wire, just holding everything together. So in and of itself, your starflower is done, but if you wanted to add a bail up at the top, I have a 6-inch length. This again is 1mm or 18 gauge wire. Just going to make sure that the ends are trimmed flush, although I probably will be trimming both of those anyway. So one of these is going to become the hole or the bail through which the actual chain or threading material is going to sit. So that's the one that we're going to start at. We're going to get that sealed up first. Smoothing your wire through makes it warm and flexible for the time being, and in the long run makes it just a tiny bit harder. So around about half of the way along, in fact just a little bit more than half, I'm going to put an angle onto that wire, and I'm going to use the largest step on my bail makers to create the bail. Bring the wire all the way around. One of the benefits of using bail making pliers is that you get an even circular form every single time, but what you can't do is use it like a pencil. So I'm just going to grab a tool which is a nice round form to show you that you don't always have to use professional tools for the job. I'm just going to use my burr cup and use that as the device. Let's just move the starflower out of the way for a second. The reason I wanted to show you this is not just because you don't have to have specialist tools, but also one of the benefits of using a free-standing form, now this could be a marker pen or a pencil or something, is that you can use it to retain the roundness in your bail whilst you're creating the bail itself. So the wire is passed across the back of the angle, and what we're going to do is to use our pliers in the first instance to hit the camera, and to turn that wire over. So if I make a little loop shape, draw that all the way around the straight line which is going to connect to the pendant, and just draw that over. So you can see we've basically tied a little knot. We don't want it to be so tight that we never get to use our burr cup device ever again, but we want it to be firm because that will set the shape for us. And what we're going to do is to draw the wire around the straight line a good 3 or 4 times. In fact, I think I'll go for 3 times and call it quits there. And I'm just going to leave that tail sticking out for now, purely because I think I might want to put a spiral over the top a little bit later on. So let's just close that up so that it sticks out to the side. So if you imagine that this is going to be the bail, it needs to sit at right angles to the starflower design, which means that I need to bring the loop that we're going to use to put through the starflower in the same orientation as the loop for the bail itself. So if I just hold across that wire with those pliers, draw the wire up. I'm going to use a round form. I'm going to use my bail makers because I only want really quite a small form. I think I'll use step 2. Draw that wire around to create a round form, but I want to make it in such a way that it's quite wide. It's more of a spiral than a pure loop, so it's nice and open. So if I imagine that this is going to be the front of my bail, and this is the front of my design, because it's going round a loop-de-loop, let's see which way is going to be up. I think this way is going to be up. I want to put the face upside down, so that when it goes round the loop-de-loop, it sits back up the correct way. So we've got the correct face coming forwards if this is the front of our bail, and then I can close up that loop. So what we're going to do now is just basically 2 wrapped loops to join this together, making sure that I'm not squishing my lovely starflower design. Draw that wire all the way around, and I think I'll probably go for another 3 turns if I possibly can. This is very old wire and it's a bit naughty at the moment. It's not turning quite as tightly as it should do. So I'm just going to give that a little bit of a smush up. I might take that over 1 more time and draw that all the way back across. So give that a bit of a squish and a squeeze to make sure everything is tight and tidy. There we go, that's better. That's going to bring it back to the front again, like so. and then just tidy those 2 coils. You can do a much neater job than I am, presuming you're going to have some nice wire to work with. This is stuff I've had for several years and it's a bit rubbish. Just using it up to get rid of it, really. So once those coils are all nice and neat and tidy, let's give that a squish down, like so. I've now got 2 tails of wire which weirdly have turned out to be the same size, which is really good for me because it means that I can now grab my round nose pliers, or again my little memory wire pliers, and start creating some coils. Now you may not want coils on everything, but I quite like coils. I quite like coils on everything. So I'm going to start a round form on the one piece, and then I'm going to start a round form on the second side as well, so that I can put these pliers down and move to my flat facing pliers. So if I just drop this down and out of the way, hopefully you'll be able to see. I'm just making a coil as I have done many thousands of times, probably today only. I'm going to put 1 coil facing upwards on the front of that bail, just push that into position. And then the other one I'm going to have coming down over the really quite untidy coiling that I did around the neck of my simple bail. So I do also have a tutorial which I'll try and remember to put a link in the video description, which shows you how you can add on a bail to a flat design, which is another option that you can use for this design. So I'm going to push the other coil down over the surface. So you've got 1 coil going up and 1 coil going down. You can play around with them so that they sit centrally, but the idea is that you can now thread that onto your preferred threading material. I hope that you've enjoyed making the starflower design with me today. If you have any requests for future tutorials, please do leave me a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I look forward to seeing you back here again on the Gemhawks YouTube channel very, very soon. Bye for now.